consistently and uniformly enforce the law. And when you consistently and uniformly enforce a law, no matter how egregious it is, it forces the hands of everyone involved in that social game, that being, cops and rebels, which is the ultimate game. You look at something like the American Revolution.
People talk.
If you don't shut the fuck up and you continue to interrupt, I'm going to kick you so fucking hard, you're going to fly out of this room, jackass. Jesus Christ. So...
You fucking Arab nigger.
There it is. Thank you.
I hope.
All right. So the...
welcome back to Clubhouse.
Thank you. Well, it's good to be back. I've completely lost my train of thought, but I'm going to see if I can't find it and get back on. You have an issue. There's not a consistent uniform enforcement of the law. Take the apocryphal narrative of the American Revolution, right? The colonists, those wealthy, well-educated individuals who ultimately come together to lead the American Revolution as we tell the story, they would not have been concerned with any kind of tariff, any kind of taxes, if they were not consistently and uniformly enforced. They would have gone along and gotten along and found their ways to make their money. The reason that it led to them revolting is because the law was consistently and uniformly enforced. The Crown was enforcing this law, and they were doing it consistently and uniformly. Right? And what we're seeing now is a lot of shock contemporarily and I'm reading an article. I was reading an article earlier this morning. It's still open here. It's from Financial Times. Trump's cataclysmic damage is going way beyond tariffs, right? And it's this completely hysterical piece that's absolutely unhinged. But it was recommended by somebody who I consider to be intelligent and well-educated and prescient. And that kind of, this idea is we're shocked by the consistent and uniform enforcement of law. Which is a real, it's terrifying. The entire idea of civilization depends on the consistent and uniform enforcement of law.
I agree.
So like I said, I don't think that we disagree. I think that I just wanted to take an opportunity to insert that the real underlying problem is the consistent and uniform enforcement of the law, because the law, no matter how egregious it may be, no matter how restrictive, no matter how liberal, if it is consistently and uniformly enforced, we'll have it will create the necessary change. It will drive the necessary revolution, in this cycle, and what we hope is a progressive cycle towards, something like the maximal amount of freedom allowable for every individual that does not detract from the prosperity and wealth of every other individual unfairly.
Yeah. I don't disagree. Yeah. I think in summation, though, I think this DEI thing is on a spectrum, and I think that's problematic that that there's no consistency. Again, so here's my last point on this as in two examples. One is if I own a small or mid-sized business, right, and I want to hire, I don't necessarily think it's bad that, I will disproportionately put out effort as the business owner to go seek out qualified, diverse candidates in order to establish, equitable opportunities. Right? If I want to
we're not really talking. I understand everything that you're saying,
and so I would say, right? I would say in the most simple terms, right? That's the DEI policy in which I'm going to enact in my business of 20 people, right? If I can get all these qualified people in my suburb, but it takes me just a little bit more to go to the next city to go find some talented people, right? That's my DEI, right?
Yeah, your idea is, I completely understand what you're saying, and I completely understand the criticism, and I agree 100% with the criticism.
Right.
That if you're going to implement some kind of requirement for diversity, equity, and inclusion, you have to be cognizant of the actuarial tables that are involved there, so that they're not needlessly or unfairly put an imposition that prevents you from even having the opportunity to do business. Yeah, but that's not really the issue, right? That's not really what's being discussed or what.
It kind of is when we get down to this like mass scrubbing, right? That's what this is perceived as. It's perceived as eliminating
some of the
that opportunity and all of that equity.
Matt.
Do not interrupt him, or you will be kicked.
So,
okay, just want to ask you,
right? So,
hi, Matt. Hello, everyone.
Is he still talking?
No, I'm sorry, he's been kicked.
That's okay. So my very last point is in that example, right? I could say that's DEI, right? And so, in the most mild and tame, understanding of the definition and the term, right? Because it has no definition in term. And so I think there are a lot of people that just want to have that ability, right, and that identity and that opportunity, and they're seeing the scrubbing as wholeheartedly, denying a huge amount of people that particular effort. Does that make sense?
Yeah, everything that you said makes sense to me. But I want to be clear. There's not a philosophical. There's not a realm where you can argue that we believe in liberal democracy, and a component of it is inherently diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. The idea that you can have a liberal democracy, but there's also a requirement that whatever governance form emerges from the liberal democratic consensus must impose requirements on each individual to force them to pursue diversity, equity, and inclusion is preposterous. That's inconsistent.
Well, here's what I would say to that. I would say, in an idealistic manner, I again, very strongly, idealistically, I agree with you. It's not in human nature to do so, and therefore.
Well, it's not only that. Hold on. Everybody else, hold on. I'm having a conversation with Matt right now. All right, Matt. So
and because it's not only human nature inherently, and it's going to leave people behind that don't deservingly. Right?
No, that's not right. That's not right. You don't get to look at liberal democracy and say that it's not liberal democracy if there is a top-down imposition of identifying minority individuals and assigning them special protected status. That's not liberal democracy. You don't get to say everybody's going to be equal under the law, but some people are going to be more equal than others. Now, look, I'm not trying to make an argument for or against liberal democracy. I'm just pointing out. Okay, seriously.
Where did Israel enter?
Well, maybe if you stick around for more than 5 minutes, you just came into the bloody room, you'll hear something, and you'll be able to hear what Israel had to do with any of this. We are talking to one of the world's foremost, most prominent Zionist Jews, Matt, and he has something he can teach all of us about how we can celebrate and elevate the state of Israel to the power and prestige that it ought to have in this world before the second coming of Hashem.
I just want to say I'm definitely a bigger Zionist than Matt, so
True.
Just saying.
She has personally vested her life interest in. Anyway.
Well, that's a resounding endorsement for your value as a human being and your redeemability, Matt.
No, but again, I think if everyone started on an equal playing field, but that's
no, hold on. Matt, there's an opportunity here because you seem to be under a false impression derived from the Declaration of Independence because. There was so much, any time that you set out to write a document, a lot of people ask me, they say, Diogenes, you're so smart. They say I'm good looking too. But I mean, that's not relevant. They say, Diogenes, you're so smart. You should write a book. But if you're being honest, when you set out to write something, everything that you're writing comes with so much more that you're not writing. And so, it really is an artistic endeavor creative endeavor, but it always leaves something out. And in writing the Declaration of Independence, there's things that could be written and there's things that could not be written. I mean, if he's taking a phone call, Matt. Come on, this is too important.
Oh, wow.
This is not. You need to put do not disturb on your phone right now. Bottom line, for anyone who's listening, who's interested in this idea of we all need to be equal before the law.
I'm back.
Matt. Okay, so yeah, let me try to catch you up to speed here, Matt. Anytime you write something, there's something you're not writing, and the people are going to look at what you're writing. They're going to read what you're writing. They're not going to be reading what you're not writing. But this is why it's so important that you know the audience, right? Because there's things you can't write. If the people were writing out all of their grievances to the Crown, they would have been collecting signatures. They would have been writing. They would have, until their hands were cramping, and they would have never submitted a document. At some point, someone had to come in and say, "Look, there's things we're going to say. There's things we're not going to say. We're not going to be able to put it all into writing." And when they said, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, they clearly did not believe that. No one would have taken that to mean what it was interpreted to mean in contemporary America. They never intended to say that everyone is equal even before the law, because they certainly recognized that the legal status of a man could differ.
Right, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we should not try something in the implementation and the practicality.
Are you trying to suggest that we should legislate? I mean, it sounds like you're trying to suggest that we should legislate charity.
No,
Exactly what he sounded like. Matty. What's wrong with you?
Assad, don't interrupt,
El
please.
Normo!
I'm not saying that we should legislate.
Sig with his fresh haircut and his big bright red Trump hoodie. Look at this.
What's up, nigga?
What's going on, my nigga? Hey, I hope that you're engaging in your local community, doing door-to-door, what do they call it, re-immigration raids. I'm glad that you're happy about the Trump victory, Sig. We got bigger problems, though. I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, better than that fucking bitch. I mean, look, I gotta work with what we got, bro. It is what it is, so better than that fucking bitch off.
Yeah. Matt had a good take on that essentially, one way or the other, you're getting leadership that supports Israel without question. You're getting diversity, equity, and inclusion without question. And the real concern has always been, how do we engage in our local communities in a way that is going to result in consistent and uniform enforcement of law? Because I have no fear that if the law is consistently and uniformly enforced at the local level, the state level, and at the federal level, then I will have no problem in persuading the people around me to act in unison with me to improve our situation. The problem is, of course, the concept of the unequal and inconsistent enforcement of law results in a bastardization. It results in the worst kind of tyranny. It results in a situation where you don't know what is right and wrong, and you have to just be servile and keep your head down. Or, worse, you have to try and align yourself with whatever party you see as being in power, regardless of their principles or their integrity, because principles and integrity don't matter when the law is not consistently and uniformly enforced. So, locally, I spoke to my district attorney. I spoke to my solicitor general. I speak to my sheriff. I spoke to my state legislature. My federal legislator will not return my calls, emails. I even went to his office. But all of those people are refusing to do anything, and they're collecting six-figure salaries to address the ongoing issue with millions of illegal aliens in this country, and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands in the state, tens of thousands in the county. They're not doing anything about it. They don't have any intention of doing anything about it. They're still waiting for somebody else to do something about it. And I assure you that what's happening now as Trump plays with tariffs, they're not going to be trying to round them up and take them out. And as a father, I'm very upset about this, because there are military-aged males who who are going to outcompete my sons and with the ability to do jobs that they ought to be doing. So when my son, turns 15, maybe even earlier, I plan on putting him to work, either directly for me, or if there's a personality conflict and he needs to learn some hard lessons on his own, working for somebody else, we can see that daddy does love him. Working for someone else, doing basic labor, doing contracting, roofing, framing, plumbing, landscaping, right? But he's not going to have that opportunity unless daddy secures the border and goes to the next step, which is deporting with prejudice all of the illegal aliens who have stolen prosperity from myself and my children. Because when he goes out into that labor force, the labor force that has been endorsed and protected by Donald Trump's administration and the financial institutions, Jerome Powell said publicly, we want immigration because it suppresses wages. He's going to be turned away from having an opportunity because there's going to be people who are 30 years his senior, who have much more experience, who are going to be available and accept lower wages. And I will not rest until that is rectified. And I'd encourage you not to rest until that is rectified and not to get convinced it's appropriate to rest on your laurels, to sit down, have a beer, and trust that the administration and the plan is, everything's in control. Patriots are in control now. We got Trump in office. We're done. No, we're not done, because we'll be just as bad or worse because we're fooled a second time as our parents who accepted Reagan's promise that the Immigration Control and Reform Act, while granting unfairly and unjustly, shut the fuck up. That's strike number 3. Goodbye.
Why don't you take the jobs? What?
Fucking vaginas, man. Jesus Christ.
Lord, why don't you take the jobs? So, as I was saying, if we fail to act locally and consistently from the very basic level of legal organization, our counties, to identify and to remove from our counties these individuals and to hold accountable the elected officials who do not aid us, then we will be worse than our parents who were promised under Reagan that while the Immigration Control and Reform Act would unfairly and unjustly allow for the theft of prosperity from them and their posterity in perpetuity, there would be no further incursions on the border because we would now begin to consistently and uniformly enforce border restrictions. And that didn't happen. At the time that the Immigration Control and Reform Act was passed in 1986, it was an argument about 3 to 4 million illegal aliens. 3 to 4 million illegal aliens in 1986 caused a public outrage that required the president and his administration mollify the public by guaranteeing the security of the border. Well, now we have J.D. Vance getting into a public debate and saying that he thinks there's 25 million. And I have bad news for anyone listening who thinks that the problem is solving itself. He's not even addressing the millions, the probably tens of millions of illegal aliens who were unfairly and inappropriately assigned the status of citizen by a bastardization and a misinterpretation of the 14th Amendment. And before Trump ever got on a goddamn stage or signed an executive order telling you that the 14th Amendment was misinterpreted, I, Diogenes Spooner, told you that the 14th Amendment was being misinterpreted. And it was. And it will be litigated. Don't interrupt me. It will be litigated. But the bottom line is, if we don't act, it will not be rectified. Sure, they will secure the border. It had to be secured at some point, or the state would lose all legitimacy, period. But the real test of the administration is, will it bring to bear its authority on restoring the rights, privileges, and prosperity that follow directly from the consistent and uniform enforcement of the law, especially as it relates to the deportation of every individual who has stolen that prosperity by illegally entering and occupying this country? And the answer is no, that's not going to happen unless we act. We'll take questions, comments, concerns.
So if if Trump took action with if he used the military to do the mass deportations, um, and they were to get out the worst offenders and all the lawbreakers, and there was the uniform enforcement of law, how do you still address the fact that the country is irrevocably financially broke? It's complete.
Great question. Did Abby pay you to throw me that softball? Because I'm about to knock that out of the park. I'm going to hit that ball so hard, the casing is going to separate from the interior of the ball. The core is going to... Okay, listen. And I hope that I will hear this idea repeated, and I'll hear some other arrogant motherfucker take credit for the idea, because the most important thing here is the idea and the implementation of this process, and not who takes credit for it. There's bigger fish to fry that's going to feed us all for years if we enact this plan. Ultimately, a lot of attention is being given to the 14th Amendment because Donald Trump has started talking about how it's being misinterpreted to confer citizenship onto undeserving individuals, and essentially setting the precedent, establishing an incentive for people to just get across a magical line in the sand and squeeze the baby out. The 13th Amendment is what we really need to focus on to address the current occupation by these illegal aliens of the country. I would agree with everyone who looks at the state of the infrastructure in the United States of America, the deindustrialization of our country, and says that things have to change. If we are going to have sovereignty, if we're going to have prosperity, we are going to have to be able to do things for ourselves. We're not going to be able to rely on others by manipulating financial conditions infinitely. That's going to come home eventually. So we have a labor pool. We have a massive labor pool, and I think it's beyond debate that labor pool is, by and large, a massive fraction of it is illegal aliens. But the great thing about violating the law, as is clear in the 13th Amendment, is you don't have rights as a citizen. You don't have rights at all if you're an illegal alien, but to the extent that there are bleeding hearts everywhere who believe that these illegal aliens somehow ought to have rights, we all agree, and it is necessary, it is a foundational element of civilization that when you violate the law, you give up your rights. At the point that you violate the law, you've given up your rights. Now, this is codified in the 13th Amendment as it pertains to violating the law, wherein the 13th Amendment clearly states that slavery is outlawed, with the exception of individuals who, through due process, have been duly convicted. Are you seeing where I'm going with this? I hope the idea is starting to emerge out of the haze of your mind. The haze that was intentionally created by people like Tom Homan and everyone in Donald Trump's administration, who has conferred repeatedly this idea that we cannot afford the economic cost to deport people who are here illegally. We as a state can't afford to consistently and uniformly enforce the law, and I won't address that is an admission of illegitimacy. I'll just focus on the idea that I hope to bring fully into your vision here, which is that ultimately the 13th Amendment says if you committed a crime, you are allowed to be enslaved by the state. So, how can we have a problem of cost when the 13th Amendment constitutionally grants the power for the states, for the counties, to duly convict criminals who illegally entered the country and to put them to work on our infrastructure, put them to work on our farms, put them to work on our buildings? But instead of the direct profit being collected by private entities who are illegally employing them, all of the benefits of that labor are now conferred directly on the county, directly on the state, directly on the nation. And best yet, a fraction of all of their work will go towards their repatriation to their home countries when we have finished with their slavery. It's never been a question of whether or not we can afford to do this. It's all about creating a smokescreen and obscuring the reality from you, which is that we need no one but ourselves to create the conditions for prosperity. Does that answer your question?
Well, if you go to usdebtclock.org and you do just a brief financial analysis of the balance sheet and future liabilities, it is so irrevocably financially broken because all of these people in the next 5 to 10 years are going to be retiring, and the replacements are so inferior to the current working class of baby boomers running this network that believing that Trump and Elon are nothing but they're just grifters. I have been doing an incredible analysis of Elon Musk, and last night after holding his Doge meeting, he goes into his other room called the Conversation under Adrian Dittman, and he says his greatest power is his autism and his penis. The man's fucking retarded. He's a grifter, he's a charlatan, but he's not wrong. The government, USAID, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, every fucking agency's fucked up. Trump needs to shut the whole fucking thing down.
Hold on. So let's not get too carried away. Ultimately, yeah, there isn't anyone who has been elected to any public office, well, most public offices, but certainly federal offices, who's interested in the consistent and uniform enforcement of law, because you don't take your salary for staying at home, if you don't have to. If you does that make it? I mean, you don't. Why would you do something you're not being paid to do? You're not paying them to enforce the law. When they fail to enforce the law, you don't hold them accountable. You still vote for them. You voted for Donald Trump. You voted for Biden. You voted for Bush. You voted for people who never consistently and uniformly enforced the law, and you consistently proved your willingness to accept excuses for the failure to consistently and uniformly enforce the law. Why would they start consistently and uniformly enforcing the law now? So when you see the enforcement of the law, you can't look at it as if, well, suddenly we're back, baby. Now the law is going to be consistently and uniformly enforced, because we know through repeated observation that that's not what they do. They enforce laws selectively to attain objectives that are often hidden from us. Elon Musk, Donald Trump, they're essentially puppets, but they are working to reset the financial system. I don't know if people are paying attention to the headlines that, oh, I've got to take this call. I'm sorry. You guys argue amongst yourselves. I'll be back soon.
I don't know. I think the solution is always to be upfront about personal responsibility and knowing that if we want to fix the problems in this country, everyone has to accept complete and total personal responsibility for the whole situation. I think that the country got seriously fucked up on 9/11 because we overreacted to essentially a false flag, and we're now $40 trillion in debt with hundreds of trillions in unfunded pension liabilities. The country cannot solve this problem unless we completely reformulate what we're doing entirely. We can't, this is like plugging holes in a ship that is destined for destruction. And maybe that's just the way life is. I don't know. But I mean, when I hear Elon Musk saying that his dick is huge and his superpower is the autism in his dick, I seriously worry about communication propaganda, communication hypnosis, about totalitarian dictatorship. But I believe in dictatorship to a certain extent. I just don't think we're being extremist enough. I don't think we're being radical enough. I don't think we're being greedy enough. I don't think we're being patriotic enough. I think every day in every way, every fat fucking pig continues to lie and take their fucking salaries from a completely bankrupt government, from organizations that are essentially, and businesses that only exist because your government keeps giving them contracts for their products and services. There's no real competition because the government funds everything. All of life, all of reality comes out of the tit of debt. And from our government borrowing to pay Peter, to pay Paul, to pay you. The whole system is a fraud.
Well, right. That's just it. There's only been a very small number of politicians, right? That's what they are, first and foremost, are willing to put greater good in front of themselves, right? And if you're going to do something that's going to be disruptive, right, you're going to lose potentially some or a significant number of your base. And no politician is willing to do that. And so here we are. We plug away and we plug holes, right? We do just enough to say we're doing something, but right, everything else is off the table. This is a bigger problem than an individual.
Yeah, the bigger problem is us. We the people.
Yeah, but like it's not, right? Because the bigger problem, like who's gonna do it?
It's our job, man. We're too fat, lazy, demoralized, dumb.
But like you don't want that job, right?
Dude, it's not about if you want a job. It's
No, that job. Do you want the job of like that leadership role? Like, do you want that?
You're talking on a personal level, or you're talking about as far as people?
Yeah, but also extrapolating like any individual. Like that's why the pool of candidates suck. The pool of candidates suck because they're nobody's smart, nobody's willing to do what needs to get done, and whoever is capable of doing that is too smart to get themselves involved in all the crap, right? The system has failed any individual that actually even has a capability or desire to do this successfully.
I agree 100%. The people who are most capable of doing it, there's making way more money doing other things with a lot less headache and a lot less stress. Yeah, they're not going to step to the plate. Yeah.
They're not going to step to the plate.
Well, the whole system gets thrown into chaos when they stop the flow of money. That's the problem, is every second we're creating, go to usdebtclock.org and actually spend 30 minutes analyzing that site. There's so much inferences you can make. You can even throw it into ChatGPT and do cost projections and calculations. Trump doesn't want to throw the whole system into chaos, but he should and he could. If he was a true patriot, he would completely shut the spigot completely, and he would declare a national emergency and martial law, and he would even grant licenses to Americans, to veterans, to conduct their own independent immigration roundups, deportations, bounty hunter contracts, bounty hunter businesses in every sanctuary city, protected by the federal government.
Yeah, sorry about that. And just real quick, because I want to jump in on what Lance was saying, he's absolutely correct. If there was any interest in consistently and uniformly enforcing the law, especially as it pertains to immigration, that's right, there's not. But if there was, we would see things exactly like what Lao Tzu just proposed. There's so many methods, and it doesn't take any kind of special intelligence or proficiency and any discipline to arrive at numerous conclusions for how, in a very economical way, very motivated individuals can be brought to solving the problem of consistently and enforcing immigration law. And I say that because I want to reiterate, and I want to be sure that we all understand, the immigration problem has not been solved until every single illegal alien who has ever entered this country has been expelled from the country, and every single bastard child who has claimed citizenship illegally has been recognized and removed from this country. And every single employer who knowingly and willfully employed illegal aliens is stripped of their capacity to ever hire again. They are required to pay remunerations to myself, every other American citizen, to our children, and how the ideas don't stop. But let's be clear. There is no substitute for the consistent and uniform enforcement of the law. And when a crime has been committed, the ill-gotten gains of that crime must not remain with the criminal. They must be seized, and they must be restored to the public, to the individuals who had that prosperity stolen from them, that property taken from them by the criminal.
But I think you're looking at a tree and not the forest, right? The same could be said about any of the largest pillars of American institutions, right? Immigration, healthcare, the economy, education, etc., etc., etc. The largest, the banking, right? Anything, right? Nobody is willing to put any of those things first ahead of themselves, who is in a position of power to do so.
No, Matt, what you're talking about.
Because they will disrupt their base, their political.
No, that's not true, Matt. And you've been here the longest. You've been here the longest, and so I'm struck that you did not understand what I had said earlier, which is that I gave you the. Do you remember my bringing up the apocryphal narrative of the American Revolution? I understand your consternation. You know that what kind of tempest is wrought by the consistent and uniform enforcement of the law, and I propose to you with absolute certainty that when the law is consistently and uniformly enforced, that pressure causes the revolution that will result in a more beneficial outcome for everyone involved, because at least you will know where you stand, and even if you stand on the wrong side of history, you will stand there with integrity and principle, because the crucible has burned up all of the waste, all of the fraud, and now we clearly see who our friends and enemies are.
I agree. No one's willing to do that, though.
They're not willing to because they're not forced to, and they're not forced to because of our inaction, because we in ourselves are unwilling to face that choice. We quail before the choice to decide, to be consistent, to be uniform, and to hold accountable our elected officers who enrich themselves by our indecision, by our inaction, by our cowardice.
Yeah, right. I agree. You leapfrogged my point to the next.
Let us continually prod your point because I'm talking about
I agree with you. No, I'm proud that you did that. I think that was a good leap. You took it to the next level, and I agree with you there.
We're gonna go all the way.
Right. Sure.
So we need to be involved directly, politically, constantly. Tonight I'm going to a little get together. I am supposed to be veterans get together. Where's my plane ticket? Send it directly to me, or you can send it through an intermediary if you don't feel safe. I wouldn't want Joe to be upset when he sees the credit card transaction. Going to a little get together, okay? And there's going to be veterans there. It's a veteran focused get together.
Where are we going?
We're going to talk with some veterans, and we're gonna try and bite our tongue. We're gonna try and bite our tongue because the issue is that you've got these people flying these flags that say "Don't tread on me," who regularly stand by and watch others tread on, and cower before the power of the federal government's. What is the word I'm looking for? The government's unequal and inconsistent enforcement of the law. There's selective enforcement of the law, right? And there could be no greater harm to the rule of law than its selective enforcement. And this is a fact that seems lost on the public at large. But it must be reiterated that the law is not legitimate when it is only selectively enforced. You want to talk about egregious, tyrannical, unjust and unfair government acts. You want to talk about, all of the things that the blacks, the women, the minorities act like are being visited on them. There could be no greater crime than for the public enforcement of law to be selective and unequal and inconsistent. Because I am sure each and every one of you who thinks, well, what would happen? The fact that you haven't even considered what would happen if the law was consistently and uniformly enforced to the letter tells you everything you need to know. When everything else you've tried has failed, the thing you haven't tried is the solution. And the thing we haven't tried is to demand all of these ridiculous pieces of legislation that absolutely conflict with one another in so many ways be enforced so that we can stand back and watch the system crash. It is perfectly analogous to programming, where as a program develops and more code is added to the program, it becomes excessively large, it becomes cumbersome, it is no longer efficient, it requires greater and greater processing power to operate it, to actually run the program for the desired outcome.
It's all based on a lie
and at some point, it starts to crash.
There's no coming back.
At first it crashes every once in a while because code sections are demanding resources that cannot be shared, they cannot be reallocated, they cannot solve the conflict, and eventually the program becomes unusable. And so when you force the government at every level to enforce each and every piece of its ridiculous legislation, it will finally be forced into conflict with itself and it will crash. and we will be there to pick up the pieces to make the new laws that might seem best for us and our prosperity and our posterity. And this is the only way forward.
It'll never
and it
happen.
requires action.
It'll never happen.
I'm going to kick you the next time you say that, and I will never allow you to speak again until you publicly apologize for making such ridiculous claims that it will never happen. It will never happen as long as people believe someone else is going to solve the problem. As long as people believe that the election of Donald Trump signals the beginning of the restitution of democracy, it will never happen. As long as people look outside of themselves for salvation, it will never happen. But we will not look for salvation outside of ourselves. We will look inside of ourselves and inside of our communities and inside of our families. And we will find the strength there to demand integrity and principle from our elected representatives, and we will hold them accountable. We will call our sheriff, we will call our district attorney, we will call every single person who claims to represent us at every level and demand results. And when we do that, we will have results. I don't want to hear any of this black pill nihilistic bullshit.
Let me ask you a question. Why do you believe it'll happen? Based on historical, evidence. After all this time, why do you believe it'll happen? What's different now?
Because I'm awake and I'm acting.
Good morning.
Can I just say that I fear that Donald Trump is actually not aggressive enough, not dynamic enough, that Stephen Miller and other individuals won't be selfish enough for America, greedy enough for America, patriotic enough for America?
You're implying something that you should have never, that you should never imply.
Donald Trump's a pussy. That's what he's saying, and I agree.
No. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying, he's implying it needs to be addressed. And he's implying that even if he was aggressive enough, that his heart is in the right place, that his intentions are the restitution. Like you're actually believing the rhetoric that Donald Trump wants to put Americans first. He does not. He has vested financial and personal interests that have nothing to do with the consistent and uniform enforcement of the law. Donald Trump got on a stage in 2015 and said something that ought to have immediately disqualified him for every intelligent American who believes in the consistent and uniform enforcement of the law. He got on a stage and he said, "I enrich myself by flagrantly violating federal law, and I'm going to continue to do it until somebody stops me."
Yeah, but the people that voted for him are objectively not intelligent.
It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. That's not.
But you said you
the
talked
level
about
of
the intelligence.
How do you know they're not subjectively intelligent, Matt?
The level of intelligence of his voters is not relevant to the fact that he made a statement that he does not care about the
Any
consistent.
intelligent person should have dismissed him. And so
That's correct. That's correct. Any intelligent person should have dismissed him, and they did not dismiss him, which makes it
because they're not intelligent. Because they're not intelligent. No, I'm saying the intelligent people.
Matt, stop interrupting me.
Dismiss him.
Stop interrupting me. The implication, Lazu is making the implication that the issue could possibly be that Donald Trump is not aggressive enough. But it wouldn't matter how aggressive Donald Trump was. That is not going to solve our primary problem because he doesn't have any interest. All of that aggression would be for naught. His agenda is not the consistent and uniform enforcement of law in this country. And that is the sole reason you elect officers to the presidency. That is the primary duty and responsibility of the executive.
Complete idiots.
That's right. They are complete idiots. And so unless we act locally, unless we get out and act, because we are not idiots. We are geniuses. We are five-head, 150 IQ, woke motherfuckers who understand what is right and wrong. We understand principle. We understand truth. And we understand why civilization depends on consistent and uniform enforcement of law, and all else is fraud, deception, and grift.
Hi, I'd like to interrupt Matt, and I would like to offer anyone in this room a free pocket-sized Constitution and a 357 Magnum and 10 rounds. I will personally ship it to you. Just hit me up in the DMs. It's called the Constitution Keepers. It's a new organization I started.
You're going to jail, buddy! Yeah, guys, hit him up. He's going to send you to federal pound-me-ass prison for several years. Great idea, guys. Just DM him your address, your legal name, and a picture
So the point is, you keep saying enforcement of laws. The point is, we have too many laws. It's insane. But again, I can't urge. And everybody has to go to us.clock.org and see that there are 226 trillion in unfunded liabilities. That's 700,000 for you individually. You're already beyond bankrupt, and you don't know it. We just don't feel it yet because this empire is that big. But I don't know. Maybe we just keep kicking the can down the road.
Then why do we care?
Because Trump and Elon Musk say this is the moment. This is the only window we have to stop pussies like you and all the LGBTQ and all the trans and all the schwartz and all the cocksucking motherfuckers that ruin everything because they're fucking ignorant fucks. Their culture sucks. The country sucks. If Trump was a real leader, he would recall the whole military today and take the fucking country over, state by state, arrest by arrest, and do it from a fucking war bunker. That's what I hope it comes to. I hope there's nuclear war. I hope Trump takes back America. I hope the whole fucking scam stops today, but it won't.
I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Listen, Matt, do you know businesses in my neighborhood get taken over every night, broken into? The police don't run stings and operations and executions. There's no capital punishment in this country. We're completely bankrupt. The whole system's fucked up. You just don't know it yet.
Hold on. Loud. Give me one moment, because he asked a question, and I want to clarify that you did provide him an answer, lest he run away from this, believing that he was never satisfactorily answered. He asked, why does it matter? And he's making the point that there's good evidence that this country is essentially bankrupt. And if you think that participating in this country, being a citizen of this country, having a primary allegiance and loyalty to this country is somehow consistent with not being concerned about the economic status, the fact that we are in essence in a default. And let me clarify that we are in fact in a state of default. And they're not going to run to the presses with this information, but they have quietly, for those that pay attention, for those that are in the know, for those that have assets to protect, release the relevant information about the financial status of this country. Ultimately, the Federal Reserve is required by law to remit revenues to the Treasury, which is to say that where the Federal Reserve has its power to purchase things on the open market, things like mortgage-backed securities, treasuries, it buys treasuries, that's right. The purchase of a treasury is a net revenue-generating event because it is a promise by the government to receive your investment plus a percentage after a given period of time has elapsed. Many people don't know this, but the Treasury has agreed the Federal Reserve has agreed to buy treasuries. And then, when the government is not able to pay, to forego requiring the payment thereof. Do you know what that's called, ladies and gentlemen? That is a fucking bankruptcy. That is a default. That is a failure to pay your obligations. So you have a central bank that is printing money out of thin air with no backing to buy treasuries, thereby sending the funny money directly to the Treasury to spend that doesn't really exist and is not backed by anything. And even the free money they're getting from the Federal Reserve cannot induce enough tax receipts or enough investment in the country from other currencies to result in a net revenue that could allow them to pay off their debt to the Treasury or the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve has agreed we're not going to call their debt. It doesn't make us solvent. The fucking country is bankrupt. They use the excuse of COVID to say that banks are no longer going to be required to have any kind of reserves. Banks, as of this time, when we've, I guess, kind of generally agreed that COVID is no longer a novel, unique pandemic that is ravaging our populations, there still has been no return to the normalcy of a required reserve for the banks. Look it up. Go Google it right now. What are the reserve requirements for banks in the United States? Zero! A big fucking zero! That's how much they're supposed to collateralize all of the debt that they've issued and continue to issue. We are bankrupt. The debt clock is a fucking joke. It's a shit show. I wouldn't recommend anybody go to the debt clock to get any meaningful information. So much of that is just purely speculative. It's a spectacle.
I know, but it's all we have in terms of a visual graphic ideation. You have to understand, this is all conceptual.
You don't need. I'm not trying to undermine your point. I'm making the point to Matt that the idea you could be an American and be like, well, why does it matter to us? Why does it matter to us if the debt just keeps skyrocketing? Every fact, the idea that it's $32 trillion is an indictment of our inaction, our unwillingness to act. Like, how big does that number need to be before you act, Matt? You're admitting it doesn't matter. To you, the number could be anything. The number's already too big for me. It was too big for me when the monetary power was stripped from the people and awarded to a quasi-public, quasi-private organization who prints money based on nothing. And that's it. I'm done. That's where I leave it, and that's where I disavow. I will have nothing to do with it. So your question was answered, Matt. He answered your question. That's why it matters, and it absolutely matters.
The point is, we are all we got sold out. Matt, I hate to interrupt you, but for 20 years, we have gotten sold out to the point that everyone owes $700,000, and it's only going up. That means there is no future retirement. That means all the pensions, all the mutual funds, all the stocks, everything you own is essentially worth nothing.
Hold on, pause. Everything, right, so hold on. You're conflating a lot of ideas right here. The idea that there's not retirement because there is a debt ascribed to your numerical value as a member of the population is not true. They're going to let everyone retire. What we're talking about is at what cost and at what decline in prosperity and what standard of living are you able to retire? What is the actual value that ought to be ascribed to you as an inheritor of the sacrifices of the original founding stock of this country and the agreements that were made, the social contract, if it was kept?
But at what point is this just principle and ideology versus meaningful?
The entire concept of civilization rests on principle and ideological basis. You don't get to say, oh, well, there's something else that the foundation of civilization is the agreement. What are the agreements upon which rest our cooperation? Full stop. That agreement that we're causing our children to become involved in, that we're involved in, without fully understanding the parameters of, is now ruthlessly exploiting us and attempting to replace us with an immigrant population that will allow itself to be thusly, ruthlessly exploited. The first and foremost concern of each and every American citizen must be the consistent and uniform enforcement of law. That is the starting point. Anyone who is not doing everything, making every effort to consistently and uniformly enforce the law is ineligible, and in fact, I would argue, treasonous. You have to get involved in your community. You have to call your sheriff. You have to call your congresspeople. There's so many people who are collecting money from you. You pay taxes. And these people claim to represent you, but they couldn't be further from representing you. They hold you in contempt because you never hold them accountable. And as a child who did things I shouldn't have done, I remember the feeling of holding my authorities in contempt because they would set a law, they would set a standard, and I would defy it, and I would not be punished. How can our representatives represent us or even respect us if they are never held accountable? If heads never roll for their ruthless exploitation of us, for their intentional, knowing replacement of us with a pliable population of criminals, and not criminal because they're raping and killing people, but criminals because they violated the most sacred law, that which establishes our border, to be here and occupy space in the first place. I rest my case.
So what?
Unless you guys, go ahead.
I was going to say about the Federal Reserve, that's the big problem, meaning that their independence, the fact that Jerome Powell can say, we'll do whatever we want to do. Then he'll say, but then he'll flip-flop and say, we'll do whatever Congress wants us to do. So the citizens of America, the Social Security number bearers, this whole ledger system, it has been, because of the Federal Reserve Act, has essentially created a double standard or a hypocrisy. And the fact is, we have to right this wrong, because otherwise we're just slaves to the Federal Reserve, to this debt, this $270 trillion. And not only that, see, everyone is technically dying faster than ever before because of Dr. Bill Gates and Dr. Fauci. So you get to reanalyze usdebtclock.org in terms of mortality tables and actuarial sciences. Maybe everything will work out because nobody's going to make it that long. Plus, there's a massive population collapse because of the ZAV.
Right. But look, there's a massive population that's being brought in that doesn't feel like it's owed anything, who was never part of the original social contract that would probably result in the kind of outrage and revolution that would cause accountability and heads to roll from the people who are managing those tables and the exploitation of the population. Those people who are profligately spending and laundering that money. Right? Those people, yeah, they're going to get away with it if you don't do something, because you will die from old age, from obesity. You are the least healthy population on the planet.
Yeah,
But let's not lose sight of what the primary responsibility of those people who are hearing my voice is. It is to recognize that Donald Trump, Scott Bessent, Tom Homan, J.D. Vance, Tulsi Gabbard, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., none of these characters, none of these people are going to do anything that you do not force them to do by becoming active in your community and developing the necessary causal chain that starts in your community, in your county right now, and you need to fucking get involved. You need to call and you need to ask why it is you can't drive down the street without seeing illegal aliens. You need to develop relationships with the people in your community who will go side by side with you to ask these illegal aliens for their identification, to identify them, where they live, where they work, and not only to hold them accountable and cause them to be removed from your counties, but hold the people accountable who are employing them. Recognize and identify the businesses who are enriching themselves from exploiting and incentivizing the continued occupation by illegal aliens of this country.
Funny. That's very funny because we all know.
You are not redeemed. You are going to be deported. I can hear you are spiritually drowned. You will not have a voice in this space, sir. Please go fuck yourself. Go fuck yourself and fuck your fucking came on a fucking boat from Delhi. Fuck you. You will never be American. You are fucking spiritually and physically brown, you son of a bitch. Get out of here, you fucking shit-stained motherfucker.
Quick question. So let's say the 15 million illegal and undocumented, right? Let's say they're out, right? And
is
let's
it 15? Where are you getting 15? 15?
Whatever
Are you kidding me? Whatever it is?
Yeah. Let's say whatever it is. Literally, whatever it is.
Okay, yeah, whatever it is.
Let's say whatever it is, right? They're out, and we turn off the spigot from that perspective, right?
So we consistently and uniformly enforce the law. Yeah, okay.
In that, right? What percentage of the spigot is like still going, right? It's not the only. That's not the only.
Did you say spigot? It's spigot, Matt.
Yeah, hold on. I'm confused here. What are you trying to say, Matt? You're saying. I mean, at first I think I understand you. You're saying,
the debt is still the debt's still rolling, right? That's
No. Let's be clear. Let's.
Hold on.
I'm gonna indulge you, Matt. No, I'm gonna indulge you. Do you want to ask a question about Candyland? All right. I'm gonna have to ask my mod, Radfem Hitler, please ensure that he doesn't interrupt me for the next 10 minutes. I am going to engage.
Yeah, show him you like a good boy.
I'm going to engage in the fantasy that Matt wants me to go into.
Wait, I just want to clarify.
Strike one. I'm going to engage in the kind of fantastical thinking that Matt wants to engage in. Strike two.
I will put him in the audience and put him back up when you're done.
All right. So, Matt is saying, I don't know what the world looks like if we actually consistently and uniformly enforce the law. So let's go ahead and speculate. What would happen? What would happen if we said, hey, the border is in fact closed and we are not going to allow anyone across the border without proper vetting If you're here, you're here legally. Okay? And then we went through all of the country.
Wow.
From the top of Alaska to the south of Texas or Florida. I'm not sure which one is longitudinally further south, but you cleaned house. You literally went through and said, we're going to consistently and uniformly enforce the law. And the cost of this is not an issue because I can tell you all of the ways that it won't cost us a dime. And in fact, we can enrich ourselves nationally and deport them. Isn't that crazy how human ingenuity works? Well, suddenly, overnight, the value of being a citizen has skyrocketed. You look at this actuarial table that Lao Tzu is talking about, this debt clock, and saying, well, we have this debt, and each citizen has this debt assigned to them. Well, if you go through and remove all of the people who are not citizens, who are acquiring benefits from occupying space, who are competing with you for housing, competing with you for the products that are being sold at incredibly, insanely marked up prices, that have such a maligned, disrupted perception of value that they're being shipped in from foreign countries when they can be grown in your backyard. Your value as a citizen immediately skyrockets. Suddenly the government has to care about you. Your local government, your state government, your federal government, they have to care about you because there's no one else. If you stop paying your taxes now, they will wither and die on the vine. Suddenly your import and your importance, your impact, your being has become enormously powerful. Now companies that want to earn revenue from turning commodities into useful products or services can no longer rely on exploiting cheap foreign labor. Now they have to appeal directly to you and offer you a solution. They have to come to you at terms that you will agree to because they can't undermine you with practically illiterate, non-English speaking individuals who were purposefully bussed into your cities by the governors who claim to be defending the law that they swore an oath to uphold and defend. What happens if we go and clean house and we take all the people who violated the law to be here? We would approach a glorious, prosperous, beautiful future. And that's a guarantee. That is an absolute goddamn guarantee that you can take to the bank. And you'll have a